So welcome to another POFcast. I'm Rob Lancaster, and as always with Minigano Cape. And today we have with us also Chuol and Mick Comerford. Chuol has been working with the Peace Canal, with POF as well in different capacities and in myriad other capacities over many years, and has insights into our discussion today on spiritual leadership in the communities. And Mick, team leader on the first POF, has been leading the charge on our direct engagement with spiritual leadership in the communities over that time. So we're going to come to an interesting discussion today, an exploration of that theme. But as always, we'll begin with some reflections ad hoc on peace over the last days or weeks. And perhaps can start with you, Mick, today.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Rob and Minigano, for the invitation. Very happy to be here. Just in the past week, I've been very struck by analysis and advocacy work in relation to the conflict in Gaza, but particularly what I'm hearing coming from within the Jewish and Israeli community calling for an end to the war. Seeing rabbis being arrested on the streets in the States, heard of NGOs appealing for an end to the violence and to the starvation that's taking place there. So much of those internal voices for me are giving me hope that there is an end coming to this violence. So, Rob, that would be my contribution at the beginning of this podcast.
Thanks, Mick, and welcome, Chuol. What's your reflection on peace from recently?
Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to be a part of this sharing on the reflection on peace. Actually, in January 2024, we had a meeting in Uno, and one of the demand was opening of the road. And actually, I did test it, and it was successful. The most important thing is last week, on the 2nd of August 2025, 5 children of Nuer's origin from Likwangele managed to walk across the border, the community border. It means peace is working. What we start is really working. And I've been trying to work around this, how to improve that one, or how to sustain such a thing.
Thank you. And Minigano, welcome back as always.
Happy to be here. And my reflections, 2 weeks ago, I went for holidays to my mother's hometown village. And I think the big question on people's mind is who goes for holidays in Yei, given the context that this is an area that is affected by conflict and people are living in fear. Why are you going there for holidays? But then being with the community, being with my people, you realize that even at the face of difficult situation, people are finding the way to live their life and to make something out of nothing. And also the reminder of the values within the communities that we come from. To me, it reminded me that the Juba life, the town life, sometimes we get too busy in the running up and down, and we forget the simple things that brings community together. Yeah.
Thank you. And for me, I've been in London for the last few days, and as is my wont when I'm in a different place, I work from different cafes, and I found one particular one nearby where I'm staying, which has a very calm ambience, and the context has been kind of designed and created with this sort of peacefulness, and that can be in all sorts of ways in different places, but is a good reminder of how the context in which we have conversations and operate can also impact on the sense of peace around different initiatives and experiences. So that's been good. And the coffee's been very tasty as well. So So, off the back of those diverse reflections on peace, let's now hone into the theme for today's discussion, which will go over a couple of episodes. And it's looking at the question of spiritual leadership in South Sudan. And this, obviously, long books could be written about this and have been. And we're going to be trying to bring this to life a little bit, particularly in relation to the context of Northern Jonglei, where we've been doing work under POF and along with other partners. But let's begin with a little bit of context setting. Many who are listening may not have a lot of the background on spiritual leadership in these communities. So perhaps I can turn first to you, Chuol, and ask if you could just share with us in outline who are the spiritual leaders and what's their role in the community as you would describe it in these communities.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I would say spiritual leaders are those who are believed to have been possessed by some kind of a spirit, and they can see something which other people cannot see. They also offer a different spiritual services to the community. Like some are able to, they are rainmakers, they can bring rain. Some can even solve infertility problem. Then some also can direct people where they can get resources. Like one can say, I can see cattle over there. You can go and bring it for yourself. You are not going to die. Yeah, these are, and they have a lot of followers, by the way, and people who depend on that.
Perhaps you could talk a little bit more about the historical origins of some of these spiritual traditions and how is a spiritual leader identified in the community? Are they born into this spiritual leadership role, or how does it come about, and how does the community know or give legitimacy to that claim of spiritual leadership?
Actually, in northern part of Jonglei, and of course the intra-Nuer region, these spiritual leaders has been quite long things. It happened in the late 18th centuries, specifically in early 19th, 1920, 19, yeah, maybe beyond that. Precisely, we can start with Ngundeng Bong. Ngundeng, people say he died in 1905. Yeah, he was one of the greatest prophets, they call it, with a lot of visions, and people believe in his visions up to today. And some would say that he predicts the independence of South Sudan. And actually, people believe in when it started. Actually, it was in Eastern world that Ngundeng was seized by a spirit of Denku. And then, because of the way he behaved, he was driven by his uncle, paternal uncle. He was driven off the area. He had to run with his mother up to the present day Nhial County. So the maternal uncle, then welcomed him, hosted him, sacrificed some cattle for him until the spirit settled down. And then for people to believe that this is really a prophet or a spirit that can foresee things. They said you could lead people to the war, and then he won the war. You could also see what was not seen by ordinary people, and that could also be evidenced, and a lot of things. and he could also cure people who were sick coming to him, and maybe solve infertility problem, other rains, different things. So people say they could see what he foretold, and that's how they become to believe that there was a one particular war between Dinka and the Nuer in the place called Pading. Pading is the current headquarters for Nhial County. I think it's 2 week old or 1 week old. Yeah, they said by pointing only is done. Okay, the riot, the spiritual riot. Then all the Dinka die. So that was a magic, and that's why people said it could be believed. Okay, because if we can point people and then people die because of pointing, then that was something which everyone would believe easily. And the same thing also, there was others spiritual leaders that come after Ngundeng, like Diu. The first prophet for Diu is the spirit. The first prophet for Diu was Deng Laka in Ayut, and then it was also followed by his son Dual Diu. Then also these guys were believed to have performed a lot of miracles. Okay, a miracle like you could just disappear and then appear again. Then like taken by the spirit of Dew, and also he was winning. He was also fighting different war, and then could bring a lot of resources to his community. And one remarkable war is a war this thing like fought with Ayud North, and he acquired a lot of cow that he was able to marry 170 women for himself and for the communities. And of course, when it comes to his son, Dual Dio, he also fought with British and other neighbors, specifically Dinkas. And yeah, by the way, some of this is feel also originate from Dinka, but they become Nuers and then they turn against Dinka. This is also what I like. This Deng Laga and Deng Luak, who are both from Ayut, they had a Dinka origin.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, Chuol. And I think obviously Ngundeng is one of the most famous spiritual leaders among the Nuer, and I think like he's been written about in different publication. If you can just, we also learned that over the years there are other spiritual leaders that are not necessarily in the line of Ngundeng. Who are some of these other spiritual leaders, and what is like the relationship between the different spiritual leaders within the Nuer community?
Yeah, currently there is a new spiritual leader called Makwai Tut, again in Ayut. And then this Makwai has a very unique character because, according to the prophecy, a single spirit would seize one particular person at a time. But Makwai is claiming to have been possessed by about 100 spirit or more than 100 spirit, but 12 to 14 are active spirits. And the thing is, most of these leaders, they claim, including Makwai, he claimed to have been possessed by the spirit of Ngundeng, Demku, because Demku the spirit. So in a way, most of them, they try to link back to Ngundeng. Again, that person is also claiming to have been possessed by the same spirit, Demku. So I think maybe because of supremacy of Demku or Ngundeng, then they also try to link in one way or another with Demku. And in fact, people would acknowledge Demku even across the river, like as far as Vintage.
I would think, Rob, if I could come in, I think this is quite unique to the Nuer community. And Joel, as you're saying, the Lao Nuer have their number one spiritual leader, which is Dakwet, and the Gawar Nuer, they have Makwach and also Toothjok. So many of these Nuer communities have their spiritual leader to whom they go for advice and for healing and particularly for leadership, which is particularly relevant in the context of our peacebuilding program. But Chuol, as you're also saying, many of these, the spirit comes to them, that they're chosen, that is not something they're born with. And in many respects, it strikes me, if we're aware of the Dalai Lama, who, it's something a spirit is reincarnated into a human person. I think there's much of that dynamic that is relevant to our conversation on spiritual leadership within the Nuer community of South Sudan.
And so maybe dovetailing that into where our engagement as POF began with it, Mick, perhaps you could talk a little bit about how that evolved in the first instance, and also perhaps your impressions coming with both a background in some of the spiritual traditions of the West and the secular traditions of the West, and impressions from the initial engagements and how that evolved.
Yeah, I think the early engagement with the spiritual leaders, I think it happened by accident. It wasn't initially part of how we designed the program. But increasingly, during the early stages of the program, we were advised by many of our national colleagues that the only way forward in Jonglei and Greater Pibor administrative area was to engage the spiritual leadership of the communities. And it was one of our colleagues from the Murle community who brought us to their spiritual leader. And I think we'll be able to show a photograph of that during this POFcast. He advised that we needed to go and see Dakwet of the Lao Nuer, and that some meeting between the two of them could change the direction of violence between the communities. And in that sense, he was right, because in the long-term engagement, over now, maybe 5 years we've been involved with the spiritual leaders, has been a very interesting and a slow journey. But having been advised, I was the one who was actually asked on behalf of the program to go and meet with Dakwet in Urod, and we did, and it took a lot of preparation, time of great instability in South Sudan. And I went basically as a messenger, that I had a message from the Murle community to the Nuer community that the leaders wanted to talk. And I think that was the beginning of the conversation, because when I met with Dakwet, and Chuol, I should maybe at some point we just describe them, they tend to dress in leopard skins. There's quite a very clear cultural attire that they wear. They may carry a spear. They will have drums that are sacred. So there's a lot of symbolism and objects around the spiritual leaders that is central to how they perform their authority. But having met with Dakwet, then he verified who I was, which was done, of course, by some of our colleagues who said, this is Mick, he's our leader within the peacebuilding program and so on. The message was accepted. And I think the interesting thing at that point too was that the Nuer were ready to launch an attack against the Murle, which we weren't aware of, but we were made aware of that earlier. But Dakwet gave us 2 weeks to bring the Nuer, the Murle leadership, which we did. And that led to the hosting of a small peace ritual that had much bigger emphasis than I understood at the time. And there was an agreement where we remember standing with Dakwet and many others, the Murle leadership, and holding the spear that Dakwet presented as swearing on this was a sign of peace between the communities. And that was back in late 2020, early 2021.
Chuol, Mick have mentioned about the symbols and the kind of attires that the spiritual leaders wear, Dakwet. What does that mean to the spiritual leaders and also to the community? What does those symbols mean?
This leopard skin is common to all. I think it's a sign of a person as a divinity, has a certain form of divinity within that sees him. And of course, during the function, when they want to function, when they want to perform, they have to wear it every time, especially when they are on official duty of giving services. They put it on. There is also a drum, because in one way people have to dance, they have to sing, they have to perform, probably to provoke the spirit to come up, because there are time when it is dormant, but by people praying, dancing, singing, then it become active. Okay. There is also a pipe. This pipe is also there. Like when you go to Makwach, he has to smoke that pipe, and then there is only another person they can share with, the one very close to him, who can share that pipe. No any other person can use it. And in fact, when they also some healing process, especially the distant one, they give out tobacco. Okay, they give out tobacco, and maybe there is a link between that pipe and the tobacco they give out, because in Makwach, people worship in the morning and the evening every day, and when people come with the visitors with a different complaint, then give them tobacco. Okay, and then they say, they give you some specific prescription of how you are going to use the tobacco, and in fact we will see them. And then is fear. Fear is a symbol of fighting or defense, and because in the olden days people were also going and fight using fear, even if now they are using automatic rifle like AK-47, they are still keeping his spears as a symbol of war or protection.
Interesting. I see. It seems like Duckworth is the one that wears the leopard skin. I don't know if it's the same for Makwach, but as some of these symbolic elements, is it hereditary? Do they get to pass it down to the next person that will be the spiritual leader, or they just go with it and then the new spiritual leader need to create their own symbols of power? What?
No, like if that was pass on, then this thing will be kept at his home. But if the same spirit possessed one of his descendants, then they can use the same, or maybe even have a new one, because this leopard's skin is a matter of killing leopard and then skin it and then keep it. But this has this symbolic meaning, not any other animals. It's only leopard.
And how would you characterize, Joel, the community's perception of these spiritual leaders? In the West, we have people who are very, let's say, religious or faithful in a spiritual sense. Others who participate in some of the rituals, but are perhaps a little more skeptical, and others who dismiss it completely. But what's the perception of communities, and how has that changed over time as well in relation to spiritual leaders?
Yeah, when a person claimed to be possessed by a spirit, he has to demonstrate something practical for people to believe. Because when at the start, people maybe sick of malaria, because at a certain point, someone become crazy, doing nonsense and this and that. And then people will have a different perception in the beginning. Oh, this guy might have malaria. Oh, this guy may have been possessed by a spirit. So we have to attend to him. So, but at a certain point, he will start speaking, and then the spirit will reveal the name through that person. That I'm a spirit called this or that, X or Y, like Dew, like Denku, like Mani, give them all this name. So the spirit will reveal through the same person that is possessed, and then that person has to demonstrate through the spirit that is really a spirit, not the malaria. By attacking another community and bring a lot of wealth without people dying, not a lot of people dying. And for Makwach, he had to go to Morley. They say he was using bee to buy Morley bees, it would other bees and Morley will be scattered because only people could not imagine that Gawer alone go to Morley and bring cow, but he insisted with only 1,200 men, and then he brought a lot of cows and a lot of sheep and a lot of everything. So they say, no, Makwaji is really a prophet that can be trusted because he mobilized people, he took people, and then they came back. People thought that they would all be killed. But he used bee to fight Morley, and Morley could not resist him. And he came back. So he can be trusted. Again, he went to Pachoda. Okay. Given the river was heavily guarded, heavily armed by Wolloin with all the river buggies, but he could go. And then brought all the lot of cows, children, even donkeys. You can see everywhere now in Ayod and Togrigny, Trop. He brought all those donkeys because Nuer did not have donkeys, but now everywhere you see donkeys in the area. So, and he brought them with ease. Then now this is to prove that it has some form of spirit that can assist him doing anything, and that's how now people say, "Oh, he's." In fact, when he went to Morley, because that was the first time, only a section of Gawar, a small one, called Bang are from Pajek Payam, where this man is. Only that small section went. But when he went now to Pachoda, because he proved himself in the first raid, then many used, especially from the northern part of Jonglei, who did not participate in the Morley one, they now joined him because he has proven himself that he can do it. And in most of the time, for the Nuer spiritual leader or new prophet to prove, you have to wage a war or do something we people will trust you in.
Yeah. Chuol and Mick, both of you have obviously engaged with Duckworth and Makwach. And I just want us to look at the role of age within our communities. Usually the elders within the communities are respected and they have certain level of authority. And I understand these spiritual leaders are quite young. So it will be interesting to also know the kind of relationship that they have with the elders who have some sort of power and authority within the communities. How are they able to gain respect of this group of people?
Okay, let me take it up. Once you have a spirit, you are even called father. You are called the big person, father, regardless of your age. Okay, and Mapak is respected by all. Okay, although he's young, and the same thing also to Duckworth. But it is also very important that they listen to the people, and that's why people like Makwaya as advisors. And that advisors, there are official appointed advisor by him. He gives them some spiritual sign that you are my workers or part of me. But he also listen to the elders in the community because elders also that have experience, and Makwai can act two ways. He can act as Makwai, individual, so he has to listen to people, and also sometimes as a spiritual leader or through his spirit. This is how he claimed that there are certain things I'm directed by the spirit, so I do them according to what the spirit directs me. And some other thing that he does as an individual, and he has to listen to people as well. And at the same time, when the spirit is making a wrong decision, elders are the one intervening, and also now the advisors. They say no, spirit. They beg the spirit not to do that because it will have ample impact on the community. Then the elder will insist. Okay, and then sometime it works. So the relation is still the traditional relation is also respected. Maybe Mick can add something.
I think it's worth exploring, Chuol and Robin Minigano. Particularly the spiritual leaders, their relationship with the youth and their control over the youth. That is important from the peace building perspective, because the youth, before they will go and attack a neighboring community or launch a raid, will usually go to these spiritual leaders to seek a blessing. They will bring their gifts of tobacco and whatever else. Joel might fill out the detail here, but they'll bring their gifts and they'll ask for a blessing before they go. And they will receive that blessing. And I think the leaders, the chiefs and so on, will also endorse the youth who are about to go. But I guess, Joel, in the past they went and there was no further communication with the youth until they came back. But more recently, with the use of satellite phones and so on, they can ring back to Dakweth or to Makwach and seek advice. Where will we find water? Which way should we turn? Where have the cattle moved to? And they will be advised even as they're on the road by the spiritual leader. So I think Minigano, their authority in relation to the youth, the warriors in the community, is also really important. And that's particularly strategic for us in the peace building program. And I think it was a key reason why we chose to engage with the spiritual leaders. And I know Chuol and I have spoken many times, we engage the spiritual leaders because of their authority in violence. But what about their authority in peacemaking? And many of the conversation we would have had with them would be about, look, we recognize your authority, but can we talk about your leadership for peace? And they're usually very, very interesting conversations with them. And it does involve something of a mind shift on their part, given that, let's say, the youth come and it's usually seeking blessing before they themselves carry out an attack or a raid. I'll pause there.
So this is perhaps sorry, Chuol, you wanted to add?
If I want to add some small thing on youth, actually youth are the force for those spiritual leaders. And for example, Makwach would categorize forces into three for his own world, or South Sudan. For Makwach, you have IO, you have IG, and the other force called IGU. IGU is force, and GU mean for him beast, okay? Because he used beast for attacking others' opponent. So that's why he called his force IGU. So yeah, definitely, as Mike said, he used the youth. And actually, many people depend on him, especially the youth who are vulnerable, they have nothing. So he brought them toward him, attract them toward him, and then the youth always want to get resources. And if we can say, I can see resources there, the youth will go to him. And that's why there are so many youth who are, and sometimes the youth also initiate and come to Dakweth or come to Makwach, insist that please us, please take us out. And maybe, sometimes they back down if they have some commitment, and sometimes they do. And for Makwach is different from Dakweth, because Dakweth now he can use his satellite phone, he can direct people from power, but Makwach himself, he goes with the youth, because he himself also is a young man, I think so. He goes with the people and lead the thing by himself. He directs when to attack, when to post, when to do anything. Yeah.
So this perhaps leads us naturally into digging further into the dynamics of the engagement and the role of the spiritual leaders in peace and conflict, as Mick alluded to, which we can come to in a second part. And so let's pick it up there shortly. But thanks, Chuol, Mick, Minigano again, and we'll continue on this interesting topic.
Tandai. Ina mele al garja dai do.
Mi ben ba hong nang barami te baran ba gadanang
Ko ya rube no. Ko ya midiot. Ko ya dia no.
The conflict that we are trying to resolve now, it's like 100 years conflict. If you resolve the Jonglei GPS situation, you would have resolved 60% of South Sudan conflict.
Katanya ni kabil kagorde nalia kata wala timci neru baka wada kamaget kin boye ba kam leke modo kanoma.
So, welcome back to the POFcast. I'm Rob Lancaster, again with Minigano Cape, Chuol Go, and Mick Comerford, continuing in this episode our conversation on the spiritual leaders. In the first episode, we looked a little bit more at the context and background of spiritual leadership and the way in which it evolves in the community, how spiritual or the spirit comes to these leaders, the different symbols that support that authority and the relationship of the communities to them. And towards the end, we started to look a little more currently at the relationship to the ongoing conflicts and dynamics and how that all plays out. So let's pick it up from there. And maybe here I can start with you, Mick, just to describe a little bit more about the nature of the direct engagement with the spiritual leaders. We engage with lots of actors in the community, the traditional chiefs, women, the armed youth themselves, elite representatives in Juba sometimes. But this is a very particular engagement, often days at a time spent with them. And could you just describe a little bit how that unfolds and how you would describe the particularity of engaging these actors, the experience?
Rob, thank you. We do, I think I've spent, visited Makwach and Darkwest and Tutsjok. They're the three spiritual leaders I've had relationships with and spend time with them. So quite often our journey begins on the UN helicopter out of Juba to wherever, to UI, and that chopper comes back 1 week later. So then, generally speaking, we will have 4 or 5 days in the village with the spiritual leaders with Darkwet. So if we're lucky, we get a vehicle. If not, we walk the 6-7 hours, whatever it is, to where they are, which can be quite taxing depending on the season. I know some of our colleagues and myself, we've walked through water to get there during the rainy season. Most of our trips are actually done during the dry season when it's more accessible. But there's a lot of planning that goes into these visits. We don't just show up unannounced. The spiritual leaders know we're coming. They'll know why we're coming. We will have had engagement with the county commissioners, working through them, and on occasions the commissioners or paramount chiefs will join us on the visit to meet with the spiritual leader. And certainly in the beginning they were quite formal, but over the years they've become increasingly informal and more personal. And I think this is a key part of, let's say, our ambition as from a peacebuilding perspective is the humanization of who we're dealing with. When we began with Darkweth in particular at the beginning, he's framed as the head of the White Army. He's framed as a military leader and so on. And much of that, I must say, is quite frightening when you're tasked by a program or by others who believe that this is the right way to go, is to meet with this spiritual leader. And you meet them with, especially those early days, very heavily armed, the youth with their machine guns and rocket launchers and grenade launchers. It's not a very pleasant environment to be, but we would have gone there, as I said earlier in the first episode, as envoys bringing a message from the community. And in that, culturally speaking, our security is guaranteed based on that notion of being an envoy. But we go there and try bring our tent, stay in the village with the spiritual leader, eat what food is provided. And a lot of it is it is largely conversation. I know with Dakweth, when I think of my own background in Ireland, having worked with local farmers, I can talk to him about cattle, about calves, about sheep, about farming, and so on. And a lot of that becomes relevant to building, having more serious conversations subsequently. But, there are real challenges. I know my last trip to see Dakweth, we did speak a lot about leadership for peace and his endorsement of the Pieri Agreement. But then within 2 weeks, he had launched an attack on the Murle community, which is part of the challenge. And maybe, I know Chuol might wish to address this, but I don't think you're ever sure who you're dealing with and of the influences that they're under. That I would certainly accept that his commitment to peace in the conversation that I was having with him was 100% genuine. But I think other influences then come in afterwards. And as Chuol was saying, the attraction of wealth, you launch an attack, you come back with cattle. All of that is very, very attractive to some of these who have a lot of youth and other family commitments and people they must provide for. Especially from a peacebuilding perspective, we're not providing funding to him not to fight. But the incentive to go and attack and bring cattle back to his community is attractive. Again, Rob, I'll stop there.
Yeah, interesting. Mick, we have talked about the journey that we have started, obviously, with the spiritual leaders, which has not been easy, but I think we got to a point where we can access them in a little more easy way. But I'm just wondering if Chuol and also you can share some of the positive influences that they were able to play over the years of our engagement and influencing peace in a more positive way.
Yeah, before going directly to that, I also want to add a bit on the process. In the beginning, it was a bit difficult. Like when Mick first went to Makwach, he had to stay for 5 days and came back unsuccessful. But again, when he was advised how to do it, he became successful. And I think that became, now the way to approach Makwach. And in 2023 October, when prior to our youth meeting, ICGS meeting, I went to Makwach with the team. And then we arrived in the evening and camped in a Denkur house. In the morning we went and then we were called upon to present our case, which I did. But that didn't sound well because of distorted meaning by some of the advisors. But after a day, he called us again and we talked. And now, in the process, we realized that, it's also very important to speak to the advisors when you approach the spiritual leaders. You are first to approach the advisor. When you bypass the advisor, they sometimes annoyed and then distorted some of the things, which is also a very important lesson we learned in the process. Even now, I'm also thinking to have leadership and management training for advisors because they do a lot of things, so that they feel part of being recognized as a part of the system than going directly to the spiritual leader without talking to them. I think it's also very important. Yeah, currently, for the first time after a lot of turbulence, there is a peace in Ayut, and also there is a peace in Uror or the Low Nuer area. And mostly this is linked to the role of spiritual leaders. Makwach, in the beginning of conflict around February, when there was a problem in Nasser, then it's slowly now to Ayut. He did some ritual activities in Ayut. One activity is called Quel. Quel is demarcating or making a peace line between two potential or opposing parties. So he put a queen between the IO and the IG. So and he does that by sacrificing a cow. And he said, now I have put this queen. If IO try to go and invade Ayut town where the government forces, they will die. If IG, the government forces, try to fight IO, they will die. Okay, this is what, and that's why now you cannot, there is no war, there is no fighting in Ayut. He said Ayut, he told us that, Ayut is a very small garrison compared to what I did in Pashoda. So in one day I can clear Ayut, he says. But intentionally I need a peace in Ayut. And actually he said, because there are Nuer also, I don't want to fight them. And that's why he has won. So now you can see that, a lot of IO elements, they want to fight because they want to establish their own administration. But because Makwai said no, that's why they cannot fight now. At least it's something that can be applauded, because at the time they are potential war makers, and at the same time they can also be a potential peacemaker, like what they have done in the recent violence, tension in Ayut and Britain. So DAC also has been consulted by different governments, authority, and also individuals, partner. And he said he should not mobilize for fighting. And people listen to them.
Again, if I could just make one or 2 points on the back of what Chuol has just said. I think part of our initial interest in the prophets, in these spiritual leaders, was an appreciation on our part of the importance of cultural symbolism, of traditional forms of peace building and peacemaking. So within the Nuer community, especially when it comes to an agreement, the killing of a bull, the stepping over of that animal after it has been killed, all of these gestures are hugely profound for those who are the leaders within the community. And, the spilling of blood is a simple, very clear message to leaders that it's your blood that's been spilled in the future if you violate this agreement. So our going to Dakwet and to Makwach was very much informed by a cultural approach and a respect for traditional methodologies of peacemaking. And that has been very powerful. And the second point I would make is that within the Nuer community, within the Dinka community, leadership is very centralized and authority is centralized, which is very different to the Murle community, which is the key challenge we have faced, in that we don't know who the leaders are to speak with, to engage with, to consolidate a peace process. So after the signing of the Pieri peace agreement in 2021, and Dakwet is the guardian of that agreement, once he had decided for peace, that message was transmitted all the way throughout that community, and there were no further attacks on Murle. And I think the same within the Dinka community, because Dakwet also has authority over the Dinka community. When they wish to attack, they often have more resources to do so, but they come looking for the blessing of Dakwet. So again, a very hierarchical culture, and you know who you speak to. You know that when they say something, that is the case. So there is engaging with these leaders for peacemaking once they agree, the impact is very, very powerful within that community. So I think, there have been ups and downs in this relationship with Makwach and with Dakwet. But our own belief that this is a process, it's a journey. And when Dakwet has launched attacks, or when things have gone wrong, we would seek advice from national staff who will advise us that we need to adopt our approach, or adopt a different way of working with him. And it has been disappointing that the peace has failed on a number of occasions, but we've always found a way through re-engaging with these leaders to rebuild momentum and rebuild the process.
Yeah, in a way, although the engagement has been very challenging, up and down. Personally, I insist that we should keep engaging them, because that is also another way of managing them, so that they don't go for fully scared.
Mm.
Another approach which we can adapt is try to know their interests. For example, in October 2023, when I brief partners in IUR, I talk about Makwai love for cattle. So Makwai love is cattle. Very early in the morning, he goes and touches them, see which is sick, which is healthy. And so if his cattle have to be vaccinated, or there should be some form of training his guys, young people, in community animals health. So he will be a good friend. And listening is start from a friendship. Okay. The same thing also. Maybe NGOs, you can see them in many places. They have also this nutrition center. Okay. These people also, their children, they need nutrition as well. Like that person has a lot of children. If people also can have some a small way of working with them around those things, I think they will listen more, because what was done by Peace Canal to stop activity is also good in a way, because it will sense that people can also go away, but now people can come back to it and say, okay, look, what are the practical things we can do in a very small way, which you have to contribute also. Okay, I think these are some of the way people should approach that, and we should not leave them at all, because they managing them very closely will prevent them from doing bad things.
So you've talked there, Troll, about their own, in a way, personal or close incentives, Bakwach cattle, and these kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of pressures that come on them from the community as well? What are some of those pressures that they receive that they're trying to manage from the community side that make it sometimes difficult for them to resist the desire of some of the youth, for example, to go and raid or whatever it might be?
Yeah, obviously, the pressure from the community side is very obvious. For example, the youth, because literally they don't have much work to do, especially during the dry season, and then they will think of where should I go, and in fact, resolving such an issues is not a one-way traffic. It has to be done in a very comprehensive way, though small. Like, you can deal with the spirituality himself, because he has his own interests and followers. Some of his followers, most of his followers are the youth themselves, which also they need. At the same time, the youth and the women's, they also need food for themselves and for their families. And in case of Makwai, the advisor also, they they need food. And but for me, when I was with Makwai, I frankly said, you guys need to look for sustainable livelihood options that maybe partner can look into, whether they can be supported, like fishing net, because in our youth there are a lot of fish. Okay, people can do fishing, and then they can have the food they want. Okay, or sell some part of the fish in the local market and get food grain if you don't have a food grain. Bring the fish to Bor market. They can also get some catch and then buy food grain. So based on the specific situation, like the cattle trade, which is in Woror, is great. People appreciate it, and then also make people to listen. Also, the modality need to be assessed, revised, refined. These are great things that have really prevented, after those interventions, I think the scale of conflict has significantly reduced. Yeah. So there are drivers. That driver can be work out in that line, I think. Okay.
Mick, if you can just share a little bit on how, as a program, we have been trying to balance the kind of relationship that we have with the spiritual leaders, because on one hand, we say they have influence and power to influence both peace and conflict. But at the same time, sometimes they keep on changing their position. They will tell you one thing and then the next they do something completely different. So how have we been balancing this relationship? And also a little bit on the role of the government, because at some point we needed to engage the government in this work that we do with the spiritual leaders.
In terms of balancing, I think above all, as a program, we welcome the relationship with its ups and downs. And maybe building a little bit on what Chuol said, one of our recent meetings with Darkweth, and this is where the human element comes in very strongly. He pointed to the fact that he had no school in his village. He pointed to his children who have never been to school. And he made a request for the opening of a school, which is not something the program does. But it feeds into your question, Minagano, about government, because much of what they ask for should really be provided by government, like a school. They've asked for health clinics, medical services for their communities. And this is where I know many of the NGOs and peace partners will try and fill the gap. But really, it is about filling a gap that is the responsibility of a government in caring for its people, its communities. So, there's certain things we can do to help. Joel spoke there about cattle trading and so on, but also even just to help the youth with agriculture and help them to grow their own food and so on. So all of that is important. But in terms of influences, I think sometimes in our conversations, listen with Darkweth, I received a call from, and he will say Juba and maybe mention some national minister and so on, and you just wonder what's going on at times about the manipulation of these leaders by external forces. So I think in more recent times within the program, we've been trying to engage with the women leaders, with the paramount chiefs in the communities, with what we call the ICGS representatives. And it's their voice and their presence with these spiritual leaders, I think, is increasingly important. Quite often in our conversations, there are references to the program, the peace program, and our engagement with these leaders. And I think increasingly, speaking personally here, I want to hear less of that and more of what the paramount chiefs, the youth leaders, the women leaders, the commissioners, for example, in the communities have done to manage the aspiration and the ambition, and to manage the capacity for violence within the community. That is central to the role of the spiritual leader.
So maybe as we wrap up, can hand it back to you, Chuol, for the last word, and any final thoughts you have on how we look at things moving forward, and how you see that this could continue evolving, the dynamics around the spiritual leadership and the partnership with spiritual leaders as we continue forward.
Now, Mick, who has also a lot of experience, has given his opinion. As Mick started, relation with this spiritual leader is very welcome. It's not that we like them, but the community depend on them. Because the community depend on them and they have a lot of command, then we don't have choice. Okay, if we have to work with the community, we have to recognize them. It's like like now, somebody called Bishop Tood of CMD Yeah, you see the big problem now in Ayut, because Makwai brand him as somebody who does not respect him. And but Mike can easily get to Makwai because Makwai believe that Mike respects him. So, and when you disrespect Makwai, the whole community think that you disrespect the whole community. This is also another problem. So I think uh, I appreciate and also understand what Nick was saying, because there are certain things and NGOs cannot do, partners cannot do, but literally there is no government. And people look like partner as an alternative form of government. And sometimes, me, I also, I'm in opinion that, people can go, the partner can go differ of defining their roles, because I believe these people are not full at all, but they have not been empowered enough, okay, to utilize their resources, okay, in the right way of creating their own wealth, okay. If they have been empowered enough, all by partners that has by default has replaced government, I think things can change. Not, I'm not saying they can depend entirely on the partner, but there should be some way of empowering them so that they can look like now. I know Makwach can buy a lot of fishing nets, but he cannot see that until we make him see that we start with our own fishing net with his group and do a small thing like this. Or others like farming, the people have a land they can cultivate, but maybe for coming together, that we should find some way of empowering them, and then they can do it by themselves after that. Even this, I'm sure people like Duckworth can even employ a teacher after some time. But from the beginning, he need to be, transformed to that level until he starts thinking of his children as his own future. Yes, and then there is also a problem, a challenge, because we have been engaging them directly. If all of a sudden if we stop, then they will say, "Nah, these people have stopped my relating with me, so let me do the way I want," because they respect the white man a lot. So at least we should keep that that relation, just one in a while, visit them, chat with them, and for me as a way of management. And of course we think of how can we transform them? How can we transform them? Okay, it's slowly, and then how can also they know that they have resources, a wealth that they can also put in any project. And for Mapajas, maybe over 7,000 cows. This over 7,000 cows, he still does not see how he can also employ a nurse or somebody that can help his kid, because he has now a small kid. So this is what I can add.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Chuol. Even across 2 episodes, we can only really touch on some of the engagements and the issues and themes that are involved here, but it's fascinating to explore it even a little bit, and plenty of both opportunities and challenges that you both have reflected as we've discussed. And when you situate that in the dynamics of the broader conflict in South Sudan over political power, it'll be interesting to revisit this conversation as well at some point in the future. But let's leave it there for now. Thank you both, Chuol and Mick, and as always, Minagano. And we'll be back again with the next POFcast with an as yet undetermined theme. Until then, thanks for joining us. And you can, as always, find more information about what POF's up to and Peace Canal as well on the website www.pofss.org. Thanks for all your participation today.
Welcome.
Thanks, everyone.